KCB has been one of our biggest and very reliable bank business partners, and our relationship started back in 1999 when we were expanding our business and infrastructure. The reason why we chose KCB is because they had secured the market early. They were doing issues to do with trade financing, asset financing, and therefore we found a good finance partner in terms of satisfying customer needs and being able to be proactive in terms of responding to our business needs. In terms of service, they have been offering us various products, beginning with trade finance in terms of import finance that has enabled us to be able to pay our bills through KCB.
Right now we do KCB Mtaani, especially with our sales trucks, where our salesmen deposit cash to the KCB agents Mtaani, and it's very efficient. And they've been flexible, and we have no problem so far with that.
Whenever we need expansion in terms of business growth or opening new business, we have been looking upon KCB because they have very reliable loan facilities and overdraft facilities. We've been able to approach them to implement new business technologies in terms of milling, in terms of packaging products, and also opening new branches. In every business relationship, you need reliable support system. Having a listening business partner, we can't feel shy.
session. I would like to welcome the chairman of the Piea to make his remarks.
Thanks, Wajuko. Senator Wamatinga, Chair Energy Committee, directors of Piea present, with KCB, our main sponsor, other members of Piea, good morning. It's my honor today to welcome you to this session on Petroleum Institute of East Africa, Piea, and World Liquid Gas Association, Wlga, Africa LPG Summit, which is taking place this week from today the 19th through to 21st here in Mombasa at this venue of Kenya School of Government. The theme of this year's workshop is Shaping African Energy Transition. First of all, please allow me to thank the county government of Mombasa for graciously hosting the 13th Piea Wlga LPG Summit and the training workshop. Allow me also to extend our appreciation to the Kenya School of Government for providing this venue for this private sector platform. Sorry, allow me to interrupt my speech and welcome our PS, Karibu Sana, and you feel welcome, please. So, I'm saying I want to take this opportunity to thank the Kenya School of Government for providing this venue for this private sector platform, whose objective is to have a private, public, and the civil society sectors to discuss on crucial matters that aim to promote and sustain economic development. This is a true demonstration of a private-public sector cooperation. And indeed, we applaud the CS of Public Service for its visionary support in opening the doors to the Kenya School of Government for private sector. We would have been in a hotel just nearby, but we are all proud that we partnering with the government to hold a private event in this venue. And I think we're proud of that. We've done it in other venues in Nairobi, and we look forward to have a very successful summit here. On behalf of directors and the members of Piea, the leadership and the members of Wlga, and our platinum sponsor, Kenya Commercial Bank, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome all of you who have attended this annual event personally or virtually. We have participants from countries across Africa, Europe, Asia, who have diverse energy sector interests, but with a common denominator: energy transition, and specifically rating of Africa's performance in the transition. We have a comprehensive objective as indicated in the agenda. I trust everybody has that copy. And as we share sector-specific experiences and the status, my appeal would be that we take the learnings and submit them as may be necessary for implementation through the relevant country and or regional instruments. It is upon this that we can drive the request energy transition action plans and whose progress we can track and report in the next year's forum. I'm sure that we will deliberate further on this. Just before I call upon Honorable Senator, let's put some facts into place. When we talk of energy transition, I will bring to Africa and closer home here in Kenya, we're talking of giving opportunity to many Kenyans to have cleaner energy. When I say many Kenyans, it's seated here, we may not help understand to what extent most of the Kenyans are going through use of non-clean energy for cooking. And why I bring it to cooking, it's an activity that is done every day, probably 3 times a day or more, by our beloved mothers and in their presence, children. And these are the most vulnerable people in our society. And they are the ones who are exposed. PS and Honorable Senator, in Africa, men mostly will hang around somewhere and come home and be given food. So they don't have to deal with smoke and everything else. It is our mothers, our wives, our spouses, and children who face this. In Kenya here, close to 50% of cooking is done with firewood and charcoal, 50%. The next 20 to 25% is kerosene. Now that's over 70% of cooking is done where the smoke levels and everything is tough enough for those to eventually experience difficulties with the, whether with the breathing and some lasting conditions. That's where it is important for us to think transition. To think transition and to give those communities cleaner energy. LPG here in Kenya, penetration is barely 14–15%. It's very low. Kenya is not one of the smallest economies in Africa. But when it comes to LPG penetration, we are way behind. Our Excellency the President has called upon us as private sector to participate in this action, to see this change, and the change fast. And those who recall, there is a call to double the per capita income in the next 2 to 3 years. I believe if we all partner together with the government, we can see that in a lesser period, because the opportunity is there, the willingness is there, and that starts with private-public partnership and in conjunction with the government. And that's why we are very proud this morning to have our senator, and I'll be calling up, I'll request you to allow me to call our senator, Wamatinga, to share his view on this, his comments around this, and being the chair of Energy Committee, he is central to this, and thereafter he can invite our peers who has a special message from our CS who could not make it here. Please join me to welcome our Honorable Senator. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Bon CEO, Bwana Chairman, the Pia's Petroleum, Honorable Riban, all guests here, good morning. Good morning once more. For those who we've not met before, my name is Wahome Wamatinga, Senator Nyeri County, and Chair Standing Committee Energy in the Senate. Indeed, I'm very pleased to have come and to attend this gathering today because it gives me an opportunity to have a discussion, to have a conversation with you on what needs to be done so that we transition energy in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our obligation to ensure that we leave a clean environment for our future generation. This is an unwritten law, but a moral obligation that when we look at our children, we know that we owe to them a clean environment. This cannot be achieved without us having a candid conversation on how that can be done. As has been stated here, over 70% of Kenyans are using unclean energy to cook. Children, women mostly, suffer from respiratory diseases because of the nature of the energy they use to cook. We know that the President has committed himself into one of the most ambitious climate action of ensuring that we plant 15 billion trees. This can never be achieved unless we start having a conversation on what are the alternative sources of fuel. We know firewood, kerosene, charcoal. They're some of the biggest pollutants, especially in domestic households. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, it is also equally important to know that our President has been on the forefront in championing climate action. He has, on several occasions in international podiums, more than spoken about the ambitious plan of making sure that Kenya transits to 100% clean energy. This, therefore, we must also address the issues that face this industry, both upstream and downstream. One of the main challenges is the weak regulations that we have. We lack proper mechanisms to enforce those regulations, but most importantly, there is a lot of civic education that needs to be conducted across the board so that people understand the importance of having and using clean energy. Having said that, it is my commitment as the chair of the energy in the Senate, and we've just had in the holding room a discussion with Wanjiko and the chairman, whereby we said it is the high time that we sat together and came up with a conversation at the national level where we now be able to come up with policies and maybe legal and legislative frameworks that will ensure that the regulations that we have in place are not only operationalized, but they become enforceable. We know that we have a challenge of enforceability because the nature of our population, especially in the rural setup, they are yet to be informed on what are patented commodities and not, and therefore they would go and they would take whatever comes their way. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I would want to underpin the importance of taking advantage of the newly introduced eco-levy, so which is geared towards promoting local manufacturing, towards protecting those who would want to come up with indigenous ideas and start their own industries here, that they'll be protected from imported commodities. But ladies and gentlemen, it is our obligation as we sit here, as we have this discussion, to come up with a solution, and that solution must be people-centered and future-centric in nature, that it addresses the challenges that are faced today, so that moving forward, we'll be able to attract more and more investors into this sector of clean energy. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite our Pia's Petroleum, Mr. Riban, to also give his opening remark. Karibu, Bwana Pia's.
Chair, Senate Committee for Energy, Honorable Matinga, Chair Peter Murungi, Madam Manyara, all participants, good morning. Good morning. Before I read, the CS Churchill's remarks, I would like to bring his apology for not coming today because he has got a delegate from Uganda who is supposed to meet today. And at the same time also, there is a meeting with the National Treasury, which is crucial. So based on that one, then, he sent me to represent you people so that we cannot fill the gap, so that we can be together. Having said this, I'll just first of all talk about the policy on LPG, what we are doing as a ministry. But before I entrench on that, you remember Vision 2030 was actually enshrined in the Constitution in 2008. We are now close to almost now 5 years to end with Vision 30. And Vision 2030 has got 3 pillars. Of course, the first pillar is social development, which all of us, we are trying, to make sure that people get the best out of it. Then we have the economic pillar, and then also we have the political pillar. For the government to drive or to achieve the 2030, there is what we call medium-term plan, which has got always after 5 years, we'll be able, to dream in order to achieve social, economic, and political development for this country. For us to achieve medium-term plan, recently we have just rolled down the MTP4 countrywide by cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries to educate, our Kenyan citizens on what we are doing as a government. Then for us to achieve MTP4, each ministry, department, and agencies must develop a strategic plan. And remember, strategic plan is also in line, with MTP. Then MDAs draw the annual operation plan that has got activities so that we'll be able to see what we can do in order to achieve socio-economic planning for this country. Having said this, Sustainable Development Goal is also aligned with this Vision 2030 because Social Development Goals has got various strategies. The one which is particular to us in the energy sector is about SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, which the chairman and our senator has actually highlighted. Good health and well-being of our citizens, clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So all this, what I've talked about, is supposed to be to align itself so that we will be able, to deliver the service to Kenyans. Now coming back to the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, we have 2 sectors or departments in that matter. That is the energy sector and also the petroleum sector. Petroleum sector is under my docket. Energy sector is also another PS docket. And in energy, as a Kenyans, we have moved forward as far as renewable energy is concerned because we have institutions like GDC, Geothermal Development Corporations, we have the wind power, we have the solar power, we have the hydropower. All these, either they generate power for Kenyans, they do the transmissions, the distributions, and then of course the last mile. I'm not going to dwell on that because as I've seen, from the program, already experts maybe in KenGen and also Kenya Power are going to speak to us as a specialist in that area. But let me dwell well on the Petroleum State Department. We the two sectors we deal with is upstream. Upstream is where we do exploration and production of oil and gas. We are not yet there. And I'm sure that is the concern, all of us, to make sure that as much as we are also trying to explore and produce, oil and gas, then we are supposed to be on safety for our people as far as that is concerned. Then number 2 is about security of supply of white oil. We do import 100% of oil and gas, of oil, that is petroleum, diesel, and also jet A for Kenyans. And also we supply the regions, so which means we supply 60% domestically and 40% for the region. And all this, because fuel is also an enabler to our economy, because we support the revenue, we support the roads infrastructure, we support, the electricity, we also get railway development, ships, so many, levies we collect, from fuel to ensure that we back up, our economy. Having said this, in whatever we are doing, we must be having safety and security for our supply. But for betterment of this particular conference, we are looking at energy, shaping Africa's energy transitions. So what are we doing as a ministry in collaboration with our stakeholders? So last year, August this time, the government, through the cabinet, they approved LPG growth strategy for the next 5 years. And this strategy has got about 5 pillars or 5 thematic areas we need to look at it as a ministry, as a government, and also you as stakeholders. One is development of common user facilities. Here in Mombasa, we have Kenya Pipeline Corporation Company, Kenya Pipeline Refinery Limited. These are 100% government institutions. They have assets, they have resources. So last year, KPRL was actually acquired, by KPC to develop the bulk procurement of LPG, which is a program which is going on. Then we have subsidized cylinders for low income. You remember out of 55 million population, we have got 12 million population who need, the LPG. In some way, either you use LPG, or you can use charcoal, or you can use firewood, but you are not fully transited, to LPG as well. Then we have clean cooking gas for public institutions. These are public boarding schools. Then in near future, we are also looking at prisons, the inmates. We are looking at the National Police Service. We are looking at the prisons. We are looking at National Youth Service. This is a progressive plan in the next maybe a few years to come. We did a little survey for schools early this year in conjunction with the Ministry of Education. And within 2 weeks, we got a response of about 7,000 from the institutions, primary and colleges. And our little analysis, what we found that 97% of these institutions are using firewood or charcoal. And you know the negative impact it has, as the chairman has actually alluded to it. Then we are government, we are planning how we can reach these institutions. Then we have also developed regulation and policy along this, because safety and security is very important for schools, for institutions, and also for our households. So the regulation is being done. It's almost, the draft is ready. The policy to align, with LPG policy and also national policy. We are also working that one together with our stakeholders. Then gas reticulation, that the government has initiated affordable housing. And this housing, there must be water, there must be road, there must be electricity. So as a ministry, we are also aligning ourselves to have the gas reticulation in those buildings. Then the third thematic area is stakeholder engagement. Like now, this conference is one of them. We'll be having several stakeholder engagement at the different levels, because now we are in the planning stage, so that in the value chain of LPG, from the infrastructure to the regions and also to the distribution center until we reach the last mile, then stakeholders should take the roles in that when time comes. So this one is a very complex and also depth policy. His Excellency is behind this. We are rolling out that one to ensure that between now to 2028, we'll be able to move together as stakeholders and also policy stakeholders. So in a nutshell, that is briefly what we are doing as the ministry. But having said this, let me now read the remarks by Honorable Chirchir. Kenya is part of the global nations, and indeed, our government is cognizant of the global challenges posed by climate change. The country is a signatory to various international conventions that include United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocols, and various commitments that notably include the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, we are cognizant of the roles played by energy in the lives of the populations on everyday life. We are also on the same wavelength, alive to the fact that the consumption of energy is the dominant contributor to climate change, accounting for about 60% of the total global greenhouse emission. In this regard, as a ministry, we are committed to the realization of SDGs, particularly SDG 7, that is affordable and clean energy, unavoidable and clean energy that will ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by the year 2030. We also understand and appreciate the interlinkages between clean energy and realization of others, SDGs like SDG 3 on good health and well-being, SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, and SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, and SDG 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure, among the others. We should make deliberate efforts to increase investment in renewable energy, improve energy efficiency, and to increase investment in renewable energy, improve energy efficiency and develop enabling policies and regulatory frameworks. This calls for concerted and innovative efforts among the industry players, including sound policies. The ministry, in this regard, come up with the robust policy measures to aid transition to clean energy through enhancement of LPG uptake in the country from 7.5 kg per capita consumption to 15 kg per capita consumption as transition energy by the year 2030, in line with Vision 2030. The Cabinet approved the liquid petroleum gas growth strategy in August 2023. This entails multifaceted strategies to increase penetration of the LPG in the country through a holistic growth framework in line with the bottom-up economic transformation agenda that, among others, seeks to alleviate poverty, increase employment and livelihood, in addition to combating the global menace of climate change by transitioning the population to safer and cleaner energy. The LPG growth key performance indicators include development of regulatory framework, affordability, accessibility, safety, and security of the sector. These KPIs are also in tandem with SDG 7 and bottom-up economic transformation agenda better. The LPG growth framework is premised on the following thematic areas, as I've earlier mentioned: policy interventions that include regulation of the sector through policy interventions. The State Department is in the process of analyzing the LPG growth policy that targets to grow the entire LPG growth value chain, as well as development of open tender system to enhance trading in LPG space. Development of LPG bulk storage facilities across the country that will not only enhance last mile penetration, but also cut down the cost of LPG for consumers. The ministry has started the process of utilization of the land at KPRCL to build common user facility storage and loading facilities in readiness for OTC system. To enhance access to the grassroots population, we are targeting more inland storage depots across the country. That is the value chain I was talking about. Transitioning of public institutions to LPG use, the State Department is, in this regard, targeting progressive penetration into public boarding schools, colleges, TVETs, correctional services, among others. In the financial year that ended, the State Department has commenced the rollout of the facility in the public boarding schools as we progressively spread the rest of the public institutions. Distribution of subsidized LPG cylinders to low-income households so as to transit low-income households to clean and safe cooking solutions. The State Department will target about 100,000 homesteads by end of the year, next financial year, while enrolling 4.5 million more progressively in partnership with stakeholders. The articulation of the gas in the affordable housing project to further enhance LPG penetration among the households, the ministry, through the sector-specific regulator, EPRA, is further engaging the sector players to come up with practical policies on emerging clean energy solutions like autogas, among others. On other fronts, the ministry is equally targeting a more tree planting exercise of 884,169 as part of the larger government tree planting initiative targeting 15 billion trees by the year 2032 to improve the national tree cover from the current 12% to 30% to accelerate the journey to net zero. So why are we talking about, the transition? Is because this one has got also some correlation with climate change initiatives, which all of us, were supposed to be part of it. So I'm sure this conference today and tomorrow will delve in depth about where we are, the challenges we are, so that by the end of the two-day workshop, we'll be able to come out, with the resolution that all of us we are going to share at policy level, at industry level, to make our country better and better. So in conclusion, I've read you the word with the Brian quote. He said, "Fire made us human, fossil energy made us modern, but now we need a new fire that makes us safe, secure, healthy, and durable. And we have known for many years that to avoid the worst impact of climate change, we must work to end our reliance on fossil fuels sooner rather than later. And this one is renewable energy as we are handling it." Thank you so much for that.
Another round of applause, please. Thank you very much, Bwana Piea. I want to take advantage of your presence here because you had mentioned that you may need to be running out. We were expecting the CS, Rebecca Miano. She hasn't arrived as yet, and we haven't gotten an update. So we would like to just very quickly go to, in a brief panel discussion, which I will lead. And if I can get the microphones, we can get started on it now. And after the panel discussion, because we have private sector represented here, we have the policy maker represented here, and we have the political class represented here, we will allow for just 3 questions, and then we will break. This is before the, I need the mics for the panel. The questions will be later. Thank you. So thank you once again, Bwana Piea. And just to guide this conversation, I think we will start with the political class. And we must thank the Senator, who's actually the chair of the Energy Committee, for his physical presence to this summit. And the question for you, Bwana Senator, would be, what is really your role in as a political leader in the transition agenda for the country, and more specific, for the transition of what is very close and harmful, and where we have data, and you've cited the data yourself, of mortality, environmental degradation, the indignity of women, the interruption of schooling because of lack of access to what is already in the country in the form of LPG.
Thank you very much indeed, Wachiko, for that question. Let me start by saying my role, first of all, not only as a political leader, but as a father, is to ensure that my children will have a safe tomorrow. That is the most important role that I have. Secondly, as a leader, it is imperative that we say it as it is. Some of the major diseases that we are treating, which are respiratory, have their origin on the poor hygiene of cooking. Firewoods, having been brought up by my grandmother, as a small boy I had challenges with my eyes because we were using firewood and using kerosene to do our homework. And today, living in the 21st century, it is a duty that is bestowed upon us to ensure that our children do not live the same life we lived. That can only be achieved if we put structures in place, both legislative and also policy, to ensure that our people are using safe means of cooking, are using secure methods of cooking, but most importantly, ensuring that it is affordable and accessible. This cannot be done without us putting laws and policies in place that will see the government ensuring that everybody gets access to that safe method and means of cooking. It means that we must have a conversation what it is that needs to be done. We know that the private sector has done quite a lot, but we need to see the government also trying to breach into sealing the leakages so that we create incentives that will ensure that more and more people will be prepared to invest in the distribution network so that every Kenyan would have means and access to this secure and safe and green energy that they'll use at home. I hope that I've answered you. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure this is, yes, it is working. Hold on to the mic, you will need it, Bwana PS. Very, very profound, and thank you for humanizing your position, that indeed you come in first as a father, and then you come in under the leadership rules. Then there's a connection when we talk about preventable deaths and diseases on account of lack of access of what is modern and what is accessible. Bwana PS, you know, you're always the center of attraction in our sector because there's so many related and unrelated interventions that we've been trying to make for a number of years. And indeed, we thought 2030 was so far. In fact, we brought our targets to 2028 in terms of displacing polluting fuels from their homes because we felt 2030 was too far. And the questions that we've been asked, even as an industry association, is when will the cost-subsidized cylinders land in the homes of households, land in the homes that are currently using kerosene, charcoal, and fuel, number one. And number two, at what point will private sector, and private sector is very represented here into contact and also virtually. There are a lot of people attending this virtually. When will we as private sector get to contribute to the model that government has drawn up in terms of distribution so that we can partner, because government will facilitate, but what we understand is that private sector is the one that will actually do the distribution of the cost subsidized cylinder. So you have two questions there.
Thank you, Manyara. All what we're asking is about the value chain of LPG. I know when 2030 was enshrined in 2008, we thought, it was very far away from us. But as the time is now moving, we are almost now approaching nearer to 2030. So what I'm saying, the cost of the cylinders is basically, of LPG is basically on the cost of the cylinder itself. 2 is also the accessories attached, to cylinders. 3 is also the levies attached to this. These are actually the points that makes, the cost of LPG to be high. So in LPG growth that the government approved last year, I talked about, the infrastructure, the regional depot, and also the distribution center. So by having infrastructure, which we don't have initially at now, so when that structure is put into place, and we have the bulk procurement, and we bring in, the common user facilities, I'm sure that will bring down the cost of the cylinders itself. So, and that is, as we are now planning, because what I actually mentioned about the 3 thematic areas is what we will roll out this year. So by 2025, 2026, then we'll be able to reach those people who require our services. The role of stakeholder engagement, I've already mentioned it at different levels. When it comes, to common user facilities, we have people who have got potential, the stakeholders who can give us the infrastructure. For example, I've seen it, in today's program, like Wlga, they are doing the infrastructure. We have the Taifa Gas, we have the GAPCO. So the government is now partnering with those facilities to ensure that we have better procurement of LPG. At the regional level, already according to EPRA's data, we have got about 136 filling facilities for LPG, and we'll be able, to collaborate for those people so that we'll be able, to do the distributions so that they themselves, they'll be able to reach the last mile for those people who have been there. Studies has actually shown that these facilities are concentrated almost 90% in Nairobi and also 10% in Mombasa. So the peri-urban and also rural areas, they have got no access. And our plan for the government, the regional deputy or the stakeholders to reach those people who are actually in the last mile. So I'm saying this one is a very comprehensive plan. Though we were late, I'm sure now that is the focus for the government, because this one is a better project for us to move forward as industry. So everybody has got a role to play in this format of LPG growth. Thank you.
We will come back to you. And indeed, we have 2 of the infrastructure, private sector infrastructure, and they will definitely get an opportunity also to just give us a highlight of what it is that their facilities are doing, because they're domiciled here in Mombasa, where we are having this summit for the first time. Private sector, Piea chairman, what in your view would spur the much-needed investments? And some of them have already been mentioned by Piea, so what is required, and how, through the private sector eyes, can it be increased? And lastly, what in your view is the lowest hanging fruit that government can exploit in hastening the transition, and specifically of clean cooking?
Thank you. Thank you, Wanjiku. And if I pick the first question, which is what would really spur the growth towards this transition journey? coming from private sector and from the industry that has dealt with fossil fuels and are seeing the transition. One, I would like to state that it is in everybody's interest, trust me, foremost, even those who are marketing or selling fossil fuels, to move together with the transition. It's a journey that is unstoppable. So, a step back, even before the long talk about clean cooking came, most of the private sector organizations, especially in the downstream fuel, were focused on growing in the LPG sector. The LPG sector comes as a transition fuel. It's clean cooking. It can be used in the household with less impact than other products. However, at some point, the legislation, regulations that existed in the country were not sound enough to allow the investors to put the critical element of this growth. There are two critical elements, if I may put it. One is the infrastructure to bring the LPG, which brings the massive LPG and as such helps reduce the cost. But there is a critical element that remains to the last mile, is the cylinder. The moment the investment in the cylinder space slowed down, the penetration naturally slowed down. So it goes to say that to spur that growth, the focus should be how do we grow in tandem with the infrastructure that cylinder growth. Now, two points here, and the PS has mentioned very well, that we need the government. Most of the countries that have managed to progress significantly in this area have had government support, and the government has done a lot. From the LPG itself, we have zero rating of taxes, etc. They have already been done. When we ask, we get. But we also went now and said, if that is open, what next? We needed the regulation to be fixed so that the investors can feel comfortable to participate in that space, because cylinders is an investment. The regulations actually, to a greater extent, and I must thank the government, were fixed. So we have very sound regulations governing the LPG space. Where we have struggled is the enforcement. And why I say the enforcement is a very tricky question. We're looking at the big, the small, in an investment area. Who is investing? But we want to be very clear that there is also a transition of the big to small in this area, because we are dealing with hazardous product. And among all the product, LPG tops in terms of how it should be handled. You can imagine you have packaged 13 kilos of liquid pressure gas, and you give it to Mama Boga, who has no idea how to handle it. They'll put it in the kitchen. On the side of it, they have a charcoal cooker, they have an open fire, and next to it, they have an LPG cylinder. The safety of that cylinder is what takes care of that family, is what you have invested. So the LPG cylinder will not come cheap. It's expensive. Why? Because we are aware the handling of that cylinder is not by people who will understand, however much we go there to talk about it, how to handle it safely. So we have to provide the safety to make sure it's very safe for them to use. And that assurance is what will make them take it. Today, if you go to most homes and you say, can I buy you, even our grandmothers and mothers, sometimes you tell them, I'm bringing you an LPG cylinder together with a cooker. I want you to start using this. The first thing they tell you, this thing will burn me. So how do you assure them? You cannot assure them if we have Muradi incident. They will throw them away. Because to them, it is that basic. It's their life. So to spur this growth, it's the enforcement of the regulations that is in place to make sure we provide that safety element. Number one, that safety element and assurance to our families, our mothers, and our homes that when they buy that cylinder, it has been revalidated, it has been checked, filled, and it has been tested to pass the threshold of being put in a household. That's where the debate is. Unfortunately, if you are an investor and you are not willing to invest in that line, what you do is you jump, pick a cylinder anywhere, and fill it without caring. Now, what that does, when appears, is that the investor who is concerned about the safety of the people will then pull back because they know the day that happens, that cylinder won't be traced to them. And that is the major issue here that made all of them start pulling off because of fear of that. So what we require is a partnership between the private sector, the government, and the security agencies to make sure that we have an enforcement to make sure the regulations that are very sound, even from EPRA, in making sure that that cylinder is safe for any household is followed. You can read my lips. I'm not saying it belongs to somebody. I'm saying it's followed. Now, the person who is able to follow that and who is attached to that following and per the regulation is the owner of the cylinder. Is accountable to make sure it's that. So they should fill that cylinder. Does that leave the rest of the ecosystem, the Kenyans, out of this business? No, because that distributor is not the last mile, is not holding a warehouse to sell, a wholesale, a retail. You'll not be in Garissa, you'll not be there. All he's doing is pick that cylinder, fill it, guarantee safety, and hand over. Now, can everybody grow in that space? You can, but it is a journey. It doesn't start in 1 minute. You have to learn, understand, and invest. So that is the assurance that will spur that, besides what the government is doing in giving the subsidy and the support. We have to all join hands to make sure that it's happening. I think the other question about the increase in trade in this area, I think I've touched it because we have a penetration of 14% in Kenya. Economies of Kenyan size are at 80%. The opportunity is massive. In fact, when you ask me after spending over 23 plus years in oil industry, where is the next big opportunity? I'll tell you it is there, it's open. We have a room from 14% to 80% in 3 years, and we can achieve it. Go there, let's do that. So the moment there's that assurance and people invest in cylinders and it starts